Ezra 8:22b. The hand of our God is upon all them for good that seek him, but his power and his wrath is against all them that forsake him.
Okay, today we're going to learn a brand new word. A brand new word. Now some of you might know this word, but I'm going to try to help us understand what it means. So, I want to ask you, see, in America we don't have kings over our country, do we? We have a president. But if we had a king, does anybody know what a king does over a land? What the king does something over his land? What do you think?
He tells you what to do and not to do.
Okay, he tells you what to do and what not to do. That's true.
Rules.
He rules. That's right. He rules. Now that's an important word. The king rules. There's another word kind of like that, but what protect. The king protects the land, doesn't he? What do you think?
If you do something bad and you don't like it, and disobeying God, he might tell you to leave the land.
If you disobey the king, he might tell you to leave his land, or he might put you in jail, or he might punish you, wouldn't he? Okay. Yeah. Anyone else think of something that a king does? Go ahead.
That's fine. We can do another.
If you fight and be bad, he stops that, doesn't he? Okay. And we'll take maybe one or two more.
He executes prisoners.
He might. If they were really bad, like if they murdered somebody, he might execute them. That's right. Maybe an hour? Yeah. Might take them an hour to figure out which way they're going to execute them, huh? All right, Avery?
Some kings sin.
Some kings, well, they're human beings, right? So human beings, all human beings sin, don't they? And since kings are human beings, they would sin sometimes. Yes. Now, you remember, can anybody think of another word that is like the word rule? We say the king rules over his land. Can you think of another word that's like that? We say the king this instead of rule, but like rule over his land. Avery? Owns. Most of the time with kings, the kings own lots of land, sometimes the whole land. How many have ever heard the word reign? Not rain like it's coming down outside, but the king reigns over his land. Does that make sense? It's like rule. All the things that we're saying about a king, he does those things because he reigns over the land. He controls what happens in his land. Right? Okay? He says he makes the rules in his land because he reigns over his land. He rules over his land. You kind of understand this word reign? Okay? Reign, it's not R-A-I-N, it's reign. Like the king reigns, just like the king rules. Right, now the reason we got to learn that is because God is a special kind of king, isn't he? He's a king over kings, isn't he? He's greater than all kings. And so there's a special word for that. Now we use it in different senses, but today we're going to use the word sovereign. See this word right here? Sovereign. Sovereign, God is sovereign. God is not just a king. God doesn't just, see that word there? That's reign, like rule. God isn't just a king. He's a sovereign. He's a king over kings. Now, we're going to say this over and over again. And what the word sovereign means is this right here. Okay? So let's see. If you can read with me. If you can't, listen, and we'll learn it. Let me say it first, because the big words are the important ones. God is always in complete control of everything, everywhere. Okay, now a king, he's in charge of the things in his country, right? So that means he reigns over his country. But because God is sovereign, God is always in complete control of everything, everywhere. Okay? So let's say that together. Let's say this what's on this paper together. Ready? God is always in complete control of everything, everywhere. See, God is over everything, the whole world, right? And everything in the world, he is in complete control. He is sovereign. What he wants to happen, happens. He controls everything. And when we say God is always in complete control of everything, everywhere, we're saying that God is, there's one word that this means. Mighty, but it's this word right here. Sovereign. Okay? If I say God is always in complete control of everything, everywhere, that means that God is sovereign. If I say God is sovereign, that means that God is always in complete control of everything, everywhere. Right? Okay, now, so we know that, but we're just going to learn that for the next 4 weeks in our new set of lessons. Mrs. Voegtlin said we got a new verse and a new lesson. And in these lessons, we're going to learn about Ezra, Nehemiah. Ezra is our verses from his book of the Bible. Ezra, Nehemiah, and then 3 prophets. And I'm going to say these 3 prophets a certain way. I'm going to see if it makes you think of anything in particular. Okay, so listen real closely. The 3 prophets' names are Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi. What do you think, Jayla? I think she's close. I think she's right. Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi. She just can't get it to come out of her tongue. Lucas, what do you think? I don't know.
All in the Bible.
They are in the Bible. Do we know what part of the Bible they're in? I mean, there's 2 parts. There's one way to look at it is there's 2 parts of the Bible. There's a Testament and a Testament. Old Testament and New Testament. So what part is Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi in? And then the Old Testament or the New Testament? What do you think? Old or New? Old. They're in the Old Testament. And now, Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi, what about, where are they in the Old Testament? They're the very last 3 books of the Old Testament. So we're going to learn more from the Old Testament after this book, but we're kind of coming close to the end. And that's why we're learning from Ezra, Nehemiah, and Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi. Not all of them today. But we're going to be learning from them. Now, you guys have seen maps like this before. This one's different because it's on a different book. But over here, it says Palestine. Sometimes we would say another word for this area, 2 other words for this area. In fact, last lesson's map had 2 other words on here. Remember the countries that were right here by the Sea of Galilee, or by the Mediterranean Sea, the Great Sea? Remember those countries' names? Judah and Israel. That's right. And see right here it says Jerusalem. And now the Bible begins to call this area Palestine, not just Judah and Israel. Palestine. And then over here, way over here, all the way by another big sea, is the city of Babylon. Okay? So what is there? And then there's a line between Babylon and Palestine. Who lives in Palestine? Who lives in Judah and Israel? In our stories. What people live there? Somebody sing. Jada, what people live here? Israelites. And who are the Israelites? Does that sound like a good answer to that question? Did you hear what she said? Who are the Israelites? Let's say it together. God's people. Okay? So God's people live here because God gave this land to his people, right? Now, for the last few weeks, we heard how Israel sinned against God, didn't they? They sinned against God. In the land where they had, there was a great temple there, right? Remember that? But how did they sin against God? How did God's people sin against him? What did they do? What are some things that they did? Jesse?
They were probably making idols.
Making idols? They did make idols. And they prayed to the idols, and they offered sacrifices to the idols. That's right. One of the kings, and if the king did it, other people did it too. They offered their children to these idols. Do you think God was happy with that? No. He wanted to bless them, but could he bless them if they were sinning against him? He can't. No, because he had warned them, hadn't he? He warned them that if they sinned against him, he would do what? He would have to punish them. Okay? Now, there's a hint on this picture. Can you remember how God punished his people? How did God punish his people? I'm going to ask. Ja'Cory, don't say yeah. I want some other people to think. How did God punish his people? Ja'Cory, what do you think? I'm sorry? Well, chaining them, why would they be chained? Yeah, well, they didn't have handcuffs like we have these days. So they chained them up, and then what? Just leave them sitting there in chains?
No.
Took them as slaves and servants in another country. That's right. They took them from their land, they took them out of their land, and took them all over the place. But one of the places that they took them was all the way to Babylon. All the way to Babylon. The Babylonians captured the people of Israel and took them slaves and carried them off all the way to Babylon. And there in Babylon, they did whatever they were told, because they weren't free to do whatever they wanted. Now, so after a while, but this is the land that God gave Israel, right? God had plans for this land still. Do you think God could move people from Babylon all the way back to Palestine?
Yes.
How can God do that? Or why can God do that? Why can God move people from that? Jasmine? Because he's got the powers. Because he is sovereign, right? Because he's God. Because he is always in complete control of everything everywhere. He could do that. And we're going to learn how he did that. Now, if you were living all the way over here, do you think you could just get up and move over here?
No.
No. Especially if you're over here and it's not your land. Why are you over here? If you're a person from Israel, why are you living way over here? Because you are, well, we're all sinners. You're a servant and a slave. Can a servant just say, oh, I feel like moving?
No.
No. They can't do that.
You'd have to escape.
You'd have to escape or something like that. So, we're going to learn today how God moved lots of people from Babylon back to Jerusalem. God could do that because he is sovereign. He's always in complete control of everything, everywhere. And today we're going to see how he did that. I'm going to tell you that I can imagine that people were sitting there in Persia, near Babylon, all the way over here, and they might have been thinking, I wonder if we're ever going to be able to see the temple again. Well, one of them might probably said, well, even if we could go back to Jerusalem, we wouldn't see the temple because King Nebuchadnezzar burned it down. Remember our last picture in the last story? Burned it down and just destroyed it. It's nothing even there. But somebody else said, but God has given us promises. I remember that Jeremiah, remember we had the prophet Jeremiah? Jeremiah promised that after 70 years, we would be able to go back to our land. Well, another guy said, well, how in the world is that going to happen? How is it? We're over here. We can't just leave and do whatever we want. I know God said it, but how would that ever happen? Well, I don't know exactly if they were talking about that when it happened, but one day in their town, a man from the new king was the king of Persia. Persia had captured Babylon. And so now, there was not Babylonians in charge, there was Persians in charge. Okay? The Persians were in charge, and the new king of Persia he didn't come himself. He sent somebody to all the towns in the area and said, Hear ye, the king, King Cyrus, has said that God has allowed him to have control over all the nations of the world, and he wants King Cyrus to build him a house in Jerusalem. Well, what is a house in Jerusalem going to be like? A temple. King Cyrus, was King Cyrus an Israelite? No, he was a Persian. But God put it in King Cyrus's heart to build him a temple. Did the Israelites have enough money or power to go and build a temple? No, they were servants. Who had all the power and the money? God did? Well, who on earth had all the power and the money? King Cyrus. And so God put it in King Cyrus' heart, and King Cyrus sent message to all people and said, listen up. I am going to pay the money to build a house for God in Jerusalem. And I want everybody in my kingdom, anybody that wants to, that's a Jew, can move back to Jerusalem. Well, there you go, right? They were stuck there. They thought they had to stay there, but the king said they could go back. And then the king said this, if any of you are in your land and you're living and you don't want to go back, you ought to send some money with those that are going back. So, all of a sudden, they thought they were stuck in their land, but who worked it out that they could go back? God did. Who did God use? King Cyrus. You know what? All the way back in Isaiah, even before the people of Israel were captive, God said that King Cyrus would do that. He said it using his name. He said there would be a King Cyrus that would send his people back. God knows everything, doesn't he? He even knows it before it happens. So, all the people, not all the people, but a whole bunch of people that were Jews decided they wanted to go back there. Lots and lots and lots of people. Now, there was a lot of people that said, maybe they were just 50 or 60 years old and they never even had been to Jerusalem. They said, well, I grew up here. Everything that I have is here, but I will give some money to help. So, but the Bible says 50,000 people moved. That's a lot of people on a big trip. Have you ever been on a big trip? Have you ever been on a trip with a lot of people? Maybe on a school trip? Been on a school trip with 50 or 60 or 100 or so people? A lot of people? How about 50,000 people? That's a big trip. Well, they took off, and beside that, King Cyrus, not only did he tell them they could go, King Cyrus said to Zerubbabel, now that's a big name, but he said to Zerubbabel, the leader, he said, King Nebuchadnezzar took everything out of the temple, the gold and the silver, but I'm giving it back to you. 5,400 pieces of gold and silver, different things, and you take those back and put them in the service of the temple when it gets finished. Wow! 5,400 pieces of gold, things that they needed in the temple. Why did he do that? Why did the heathen King Cyrus give the Jews all that stuff back? Who made that happen? God did, right? Because why? Because God is sovereign, which means what? He's always in complete control of everything, everywhere. So God made it so they could all go back. God gave them money and things that they needed. And the other Jewish people that lived there gave them stuff, and they carried it back, and they went all the way back to Jerusalem, which is like 900 miles. 900 miles. You know how far away 900 miles is? You probably don't even know where this is, but I'm just going to tell you. Dallas, Texas is about 900 miles from here. All the way in Texas. I mean, that's a long, so could you imagine walking? It took a long time. And see what they had, their donkeys and their goats, and there was little children there, and there was old people there that had been in captivity for over 70 years. That's really old people. It took them a long time. And they finally got there. Where's there? Where were they going? Jerusalem. So they traveled all that way back to Jerusalem, and they got there and they looked, And what was there? What was in Jerusalem? There was no temple. What do you think? Was there many houses there? There was what used to be houses, right? They were broken down. The city had been burned up. The temple had been burned up. There was hardly anybody living there at all. And it was all just broken down. And they looked at it and thought, oh my, it's broken down and it's terrible. What are we going to do? Well, what do you think they did? They had to start working, didn't they? So Zerubbabel talked and said, well, it is a lot of stuff to do, but at least we're home. At least we're in our land that God gave us. And the king now has let us come back and we're building it up. And so they started working. They fixed up some of those houses that were broken down. They began to live in Jerusalem. And then they started laying the foundation for the temple. Well, whenever things are good or happen, you think everybody always likes it when God is doing something? You think there's anybody that doesn't like it when God does something? All around us there's people that don't like God. They don't like it that God tells them how to live, and they don't like it when God does something. And back in these days when Zerubbabel was trying to rebuild the temple, there was people, they did not like it. And so they were called the Samaritans. And the Samaritans came to meet with Zerubbabel, and they said they didn't like it, but they thought, well, we'll just try to get in with them. So they came to Zerubbabel and said, let us help you build your temple. Should they build? They're Samaritans. They're not God's people. They worship the heathen god. And Zerubbabel said, no, you can't help us build our temple. This is a temple to the one true God. They got angry at that. They didn't like that. And I'm just telling you, Zerubbabel did the right thing. We should not work together with people. To do God's work, only God's people can do God's work, right? Right? Only God's people can do God's work. So we shouldn't be working with people that worship heathen, that don't worship God, to do God's work. So Zerubbabel said, no, well, the Samaritans, they got upset. And you know what they did? They went home and they wrote a letter to the king. Now, by this time, it wasn't King Cyrus. King Cyrus had died. And so then, there was another king of Persia. So they wrote a letter to the new king of Persia, and they said, Mr. King of Persia, these Jewish people, they're rebuilding their city of Jerusalem, and you look, if they are able to build their city, they are a dangerous people. They won't pay their taxes. They won't obey any of your rules. They're going to cause you all kinds of trouble. And so, Mr. New King of Persia, he got this letter and said, oh, the Israelites are building the city of Jerusalem. And their neighbors say that if they finish, they're not going to pay taxes. Well, I want my tax money, and they're going to cause trouble. And so he had somebody write a letter and says, tell the Israelites to stop working in Jerusalem. So the message came back to the Samaritans, and the Samaritans are there, and they got the letter from the king, and the king said, tell the Israelites to stop working. You think they liked that? Yes. They did. They ran to the Israelites, they ran to Zerubbabel and said, look at the letter the king gave us. You have to stop working. That probably was sad to the Israelites. Here they were doing what they thought they were supposed to do, and all of a sudden the king says, no, you can't do it. They might have thought, why is this happening? Right? You might think, why is this happening? But what should they remember? Who's in charge? God. Right? You think God knew that the king told him not to? He knew what was going on. And is God in control? Yes. Yeah. So, but they stopped. They stopped. And then after a while, where's my picture? I don't have a picture of this guy. Oh well. You're just going to have to imagine. You guys know what Haggai looks like? He's a prophet. He's in the Old Testament. Remember? Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi? After a while, Haggai came and started preaching and said, look, people, you know why you're poor? You know why you try to make money and then it just disappears? Because my temple, God says it's because his temple is not finished. You all live in nice houses, but my house is not finished. God says to you, this is Haggai preaching to the Israelites. He says, you plow your fields, and you think that you're going to get a lot of food out of your fields, and then all of a sudden there's nothing there. Guess who's doing that? Can God do that? How can God do that? How can God change what comes out of the ground? How can God do that? Luke? That's right. He's in charge of everything. So if people don't obey him and don't do what he wants, he can pick any way he wants to punish them, can't he? Well, the people, they started thinking, said, you know, that's right. We've been working really hard, and all the work we've done amounts to nothing. Let's go cut down trees from the hills and let's start working on the temple again. And when the people started working on the temple again, all of a sudden, their crops had lots of food, and God blessed them again. Well, what do you think the Samaritans did when they saw the Israelites working on their temple? They did. The Samaritans said, I thought you weren't supposed to be building a temple. Well, so the Samaritans and the Jews, they wrote a letter to the king, and now it was another new king. And then 15 years had gone by, and now there's another king. And the king said, well, let's see what's going on. You search in the records and see whatever was written about these Israelite people. And so people went off to the library, and they searched in the records, and they found a writing from King Cyrus. What do you think that writing from King Cyrus said? Remember what King Cyrus said at the beginning of the story? He said, God has put it in my heart to build a house, give them the money that they need. And so the new king saw what King Cyrus said, and he sent the letter back and said, this letter came to the Samaritans, and he told the Samaritans, those Jews, they can build their temple, and all the money that comes in for the king from this area, give it to them to help them finish it. You think the Samaritans liked that letter? Yeah. They didn't. They didn't. They must have thought, ooh, but why did that happen? Why did that happen? Luke.
Because he said he can have him he can go back to his land.
Right, but why? But why did that happen to the? Who made that happen? God made that happen because God is sovereign, right? God is always in charge of, in complete control of everything, everywhere. Now, one more prophet. Remember, we have Haggai, Zechariah. Zechariah, he stood up and he preached to the people and told them that they needed to be building the temple and that God would bless them. And they got to work. And God did bless them. And then Zechariah gave us some other prophecies. He told the people way back then. He said that they would have a deliverer come, and that deliverer would ride, when he showed up, he would ride on a donkey. Okay? So think about what, and then he said that deliverer would have piercings in his hands. Do you know of anybody that came to Israel and they ended up with piercings in their hands? And they rode on a donkey coming into Jerusalem? It was Jesus. And had a hole in his side? Yes. So, when did that happen to Jesus? When he died on the cross, right? When did Zechariah say that Israel would have somebody come like that? 500 years before. Right? God gave Zechariah a message. It didn't happen for 500 years until 500 years later. But did it happen?
Yes.
Who made sure it happened? God. Why? How could God do that? He's in charge of everything. Right. And Zechariah gave a couple other prophecies. Zechariah said that there would come a day when the Lord Jesus Christ would be king over all the kings of the earth. And there would be peace everywhere. Has that happened? Has Jesus ever been king over the whole earth? No. Has there ever been peace everywhere in the whole earth? No. But Zechariah said it would happen. God told Zechariah it would happen. You think that will happen? Yes. Do we know when it will happen? No, but we know it will happen. Who will make sure that happens? How can God make sure that happens? He's sovereign, right? God is in complete control. God is always in complete control of everything, everywhere. Now, before we stop, we just have to think about one thing. If God is in complete, if He's sovereign, what about us? We're not. But how many times do we do what we want to do instead of what God wants us to do? Lots of times. And what happens to those that don't do what God says? He can do whatever He wants. He can punish us however He wants. He can punish us with just bad things happening in our life. If we never turn to Jesus Christ to be our Savior, He will punish all those that never turn to Christ for salvation in hell forever. So we need to remember that God is sovereign. He's the one in charge. He's always in complete control of everything, everywhere. And since He's sovereign, we need to submit ourselves to Him. We need to do what